Yeah. Felt like we had to sit here for a sec, right?
Yeah, these are very comfortable.
This is how you do it at the library.
Questions for me?
No, thank you guys so much for coming here. We're really excited to be at Nashville. We've been on a 3-week tour, and this is one of the spots that we circled. So thank you guys so much for coming. We're going to actually begin, not by sitting in the chair, but by reading the book. Love. Wait a second. Let's get this little cursor out of here. In the beginning, there is light, and 2 wide-eyed figures standing near the foot of your bed, and the sound of their voices is love. A cab driver plays love softly on his radio while you bounce and back with the bumps of the city, and everything smells new, and it smells like life. Love, too, is the smell of crashing waves and a train whistling blindly in the distance. And each night, the sky above your trailer turns the color of love. In a crowded concrete park, you toddle toward summer sprinklers, while older kids skip rope and run up the slide, and soon you are running among them, and the echo of your laughter is love. On the night the fire alarm blares, you're pulled from sleep and whisked into the street, where a quiet old lady is pointing to the sky. Stars shine long after they've flamed out, she tells you, and the shine they shine with is love. But it's not only stars that flame out, you discover. It's summers, too, and friendships, and people. One day, you find your family nervously huddled around the TV, but when you ask what happened, they answer with silence and shift between you and the screen. In your dream that night, you are searching for a love that seems lost. You open and close drawers, lift cushions, empty old toy bins, but there's nothing. You wake with a start in the arms of a loved one who bends to your ear and whispers, "It's okay, it's okay, it's love." And in time, you learn to recognize a love overlooked, a love that wakes at dawn and rides to work on the bus, a slice of burned toast that tastes like love. And it's love in each deep crease of your grandfather's face as he lowers himself onto an overturned bucket to fish. And it's love in the rustling leaves of gnarled trees lined behind the flower fields. And it's love in the made-up stories your uncles tell in the backyard between wild horseshoe throws. And the man in rags outside the subway station plays love notes that lift into the sky like tiny beacons of light. And the face staring back in the bathroom mirror, this too is love. So when the time comes for you to set off on your own, heavy winds will sweep past your building and great gray clouds will congregate above. Your loved ones will stand there like puddles beneath their umbrellas, holding you tight and kissing you and wishing you luck. but it won't be luck you'll leave with, because you'll have love. You'll have love, love, love. Thank you guys for letting me read that to you. So here's what we wanted to talk about before we get to the actual book. We wanted to talk about the love in our lives that brought us to collaborate on this book, Love. I think it's fair to say we live in divisive times. And I have a daughter, she's 3.5. Lauren has 2 sons, they're college age. We live in very different places. I live in Brooklyn, New York.
I live in Cincinnati.
I grew up as a mixed race kid right next to the Mexican border.
I grew up in Missouri.
But you know what? We came together to make this book, and we actually wanted people to be represented from almost polarizing parts of the world, ideologically, religiously, racially, to be in the same book. Because we feel like this idea of love sort of can bind us together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the joys of working on this book for me in my career is I'd never worked with an author. I've illustrated books that other people have written, but most time I never have any contact with them. So it was great fun for me to get to know Matt de la Pena. You know, I had heard of your work, certainly, but didn't know him until the first week I got the manuscript, we were at a conference together.
Yeah.
And it was great power, I thought, to sit down and talk about it. The first time we just talked about it.
Yeah, I think we didn't even talk about what the illustrations would be so much.
Yeah.
We talked about what this book, what did we want it to be? We had the text, and we sort of were thinking like, well, what is it to us? We were talking about the philosophy around the book, right?
Yeah.
Our different backgrounds.
And even big ideas, big
Yeah.
ideals. Your background, your parents,
Yep.
my family, my upbringing. It was great. We kind of got to know each other.
Yeah, and the risks we wanted to take.
Right.
So-
The statements we wanted to make.
Yeah, and so we thought it would be interesting just for you guys to see a visual representation of where we come from. So here's me, little taco-eating kid right here, and there's my dad. And the thing that I like to point out about my dad is he's the first in his family to be born in America. So the rest of his line is born in Mexico, and we grew up right on the border. I'm a mixed race kid. I'm half Mexican and half white. This is a beautiful picture of me. I wanted to show you guys. But this is my mom, and my parents were teenagers. I always tell people, you know, my dad, his first language was Spanish. My mom only spoke English. But sometimes you understand another's language without understanding the language, if that makes sense. And the way that works for my parents is they both grew up in extreme poverty. So they connected in that way. Now, nobody in my family had ever been to college. I'm lucky. I was good at a sport, and it took me to college. Once I got to college, I fell in love with books. I fell in love with reading and sort of navigating the world through texts, through story and narrative. And I started to dream of writing a book of my own. So at first I was writing young adult novels. Bald No Lie was the first one that came out 65 years ago. No, it was only like 12 years ago, but it feels like a long time ago. And I wrote Mexican White Boy, which is a very personal story about growing up on the border. And eventually, I started to write picture books too. Not exclusively, but I also write picture books too. This is the first one. And the cool thing about writing picture books for me is I do love going into schools. And this was my first experience going into elementary schools. And I was blown away by the young people. You definitely have to switch your talk when you go from an inner city high school to an elementary school. Different ball game. At first I tried to take my techniques into the elementary school and it didn't work. So I had to learn a whole new way to talk to young people. But it was such a gift. And this led me to think, okay, if I could write any story I want right now, today, what would I want to put into the world? And the first word that came to mind was love. And maybe we'll talk about your background too, Laura.
Yeah, so I hardly ever went to the ocean growing up. My Matt was born near Mexico, in San Diego, and I was born, like I mentioned, in a faraway exotic land called Missouri. And this is my family. I have to give a shout out to my nephew who is this is my brother Lindy, and his nephew is in the crowd. Wave, give him a wave. He goes to Belmont.
We expect you to buy 3 copies of the book.
Don't
Just kidding.
Don't be selfish, Caleb. His name's Caleb. This is me, Missouri. So mom was a secretary most of my childhood. Dad was a salesperson. You can see me, I'm the youngest of 3. You can even see in that picture, I was a little fidgety. It was hard for me to sit with a book, Matt. It was hard for me I learned to read, but it wasn't my favorite thing. It was much easier for me to sit and draw. Drawing was like play, but reading was like work for me. But I was very fortunate. Mom read to us. She read to me every day, and she instilled a love of stories. She even read to me as I got older, when really I should have been reading on my own. She read chapter books to me, and a lot of those books. The only other thing really that you should know about me as a kid is that I, like Matt, loved sports. We didn't go to art museums. We moved to Lexington, Kentucky. And there I am. When you're in Kentucky, there are horses all around. And your mom might put a horse on a birthday cake for you. I started wearing a wig at this point. But Matt and I talk about the differences. He lives in Brooklyn. I'm like, if you move to Nashville or Cincinnati or Kentucky, you could have a backyard. Look at this.
That's incredible. And
Yeah.
a washer and dryer?
Yeah, and a washer and dryer in your home, if you're lucky. But anyway, so no, we weren't going antiquing on the weekends, and Mom and Dad weren't drinking cappuccino and lattes and all that kind of stuff. We didn't summer in Tuscany or anything like that. No artists in my family. Never saw my mom or dad draw a picture, but I like to draw. 2 things: I like sports and I like to draw. I got into junior high school, and there was a man that left a lasting impression on my life. And his name was Mr. Pennington. Mr. Pennington was the head football coach at my junior high school. And I was the furthest thing from a football player. But I knew him because he was also the art teacher. And this man started saying my name during class and holding my pictures up to show the other kids. And I also like to point out, I was never even the best in my class. There was always somebody better at art. But I really loved it, and I enjoyed it, and I signed up for every art class I could. And then in high school, there's Miss Clifton, and that's me wearing my fancy wig. And that's Miss Clifton giving me love. That's her showing me how to make a painting. I was looking at a reference probably of a horse, and I was making my first oil painting. And she used to bring in books, Matt. She would bring in Vincent van Gogh. Boom, set it on the desk. Hey, Lauren, come here. Have you ever heard of Vincent van Gogh? She'd bring in Norman Rockwell. Lauren, have you ever heard of Norman Rockwell? Here, let's look through this book. She was bringing books from home to show me because she could see something in me. And that was love. About this time, I started having a little bit of a vision thing. I couldn't see the chalkboard all that well. It was fuzzy. Mom took me to the optometrist, did all the vision screenings, and no big deal. Your son is nearsighted. He just needs to wear corrective lenses. And, he's fine. See you later. This was Nicholasville, Kentucky, Matt. And I'm standing there. We're saying goodbye. And he says, oh, wait a minute. Wait a second, Mrs. Long. Did you know your son is colorblind? And I was kind of stiffened up. And she said, he said, it's no big deal. 12% of all males have some level of red-green color blindness. It's no big deal, Mrs. Long, very common. He's fine unless he wants to be an electrician, a dermatologist. Apparently, you really have to see color acutely if you're a dermatologist. And then he chuckled and said, or an artist. I walk out into the car, a tear streams down my face. Mom looks over at me. Lauren, what's wrong? He said, artist. And she gripped my knee with a death grip. And she gritted her teeth and sped up in the car and gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. And she said, Lauren, your art is beautiful. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't be an artist. And I remember, I look back at that now and I feel like, had she not been that strong voice in my ear at that perfect time in my life, I might have listened to that doctor. He was an authority. I might have given up.
Yeah.
I had a doctor tell me I can't be an artist, but my mom swooped in swiftly and said, don't listen, you can too.
Yeah.
That was an act of love.
Absolutely. And these are the kind of things we wanted to explore, right? It's
Right.
sort of like not your obvious love, but
Yeah.
an act right there that
Yeah.
led you to be who you are today.
Absolutely. So these are some of my books, Mr. Fancy Optometrist from Nicholasville. Yeah. I had the pleasure to do, these are just a few, the Little Engine That Could. I'm working with acrylic paints mainly. When you're not a great reader as a little kid, you're usually not the greatest student. You're usually not the smartest kid in the class. And I never dreamed I would grow up someday and be able to write something and actually be an author. But I wrote, I realized it's not about being the smartest kid, it's about having ideas. And I had an idea about a little tractor that sounds like this. Matt, do you know how this sounds?
I do now,
Putt,
because I've read it so many
puff,
times.
puttity chuff. Do you want to tell the story about Luna?
You know, I think it's important to do this because it's kind of, we're not totally sure that the copyright should be with Lauren Long because
We're not sure who wrote this, actually.
you know what? We started our tour in Brooklyn, New York, where I live, and the first stop, we went to my daughter's nursery school, which was amazing. So at first we talked to all the older kids, and then we went to go a little talk at her class. A week before we went there, I picked her up from school, and we went to the park, and I put her on the swing, and she goes, hey, Dad, you're going to my school. And I said, yeah, how did you find out? And she goes, my librarian told me. And I was like, yeah, I'm very excited. And she goes, and we read one of your books. And I said, really? Which one did you read? And she goes, Otis. And I was like, I'm just going to let it fly.
Cute kid. So Otis has been a gift to my life, frankly, and a gift to my career. We did 6 books, 6 Otis stories, and very proud of them.
Yeah.
And then, I had another quite big honor by illustrating President Obama's Of Thee I Sing, a letter to my daughters. And I was standing in the Oval Office, Matt, when I hear the president say to my 2 boys, they were 13 and 15 at the time, that Sasha and Malia had a lot to do with choosing your father to illustrate our books. They had read a couple of my books when they were in Chicago, and he was a law professor, and then he was a U.S. senator, and they were reading some Lauren Long books. They might have been reading some Matt De La Pena books, but I'm not sure.
I think I'm too new.
He said right there that his favorite book of mine was Drummer Boy, another book that I had written. Wonderful story. He was a gentle man and very kind to my 2 boys. Brought them the official White House M&Ms. Michelle Obama is the first lady, what does that make me?
I believe you're the first illustrator.
I am. I think I'm the illustrator in chief. Okay. Yeah, and then when my 2 sons were preparing to leave for college and growing up, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I was suffocating. I was anxious. Wait, Matt, wait till Luna gets older. And all of a sudden it occurred to me like a sledgehammer that the oldest was going to move out of my house for the first time in 18 years. It was hard for me. I couldn't accept it. And I thought about a little tree that wouldn't let go of his leaves. And if he doesn't let go of his leaves, he stunts his own growth. And I wrote the story, Little Tree, and it made me feel better. And I think hopefully it'll make other people feel better.
Yeah, so that's a couple of the books we did before we got to Love. And then we sat down and we talked about this. Now, why do they never let the writer get to the illustrator during the process of making a picture book? I think it's because they don't want the author to take too much ownership of the story, because really in a great collaboration, the illustrator brings something new to it, right?
Right.
You're telling a story within the text,
Exactly.
in the seams. But when we sat down, I was never prescriptive. We never even talked about ideas, really. We just talked about what was this world going to be. Never
Right.
specific images, just what did we think we wanted it to be. And I'll tell you, Lauren, when I was drafting this book, I remember thinking, it's really hard for me to go from watching the news, and there's a lot of troublesome things on the news which affected me quite a bit, and then I would transition from there to sitting in my daughter's room before she was going to go to bed, and my role is to talk to her about life, and it was hard to make that transition. And I remember thinking, I just want to write a little poem about love to read to my daughter and kids like her. And so I wrote the book, but then I got to tell you, I was looking at it and I thought, well, it's uplifting, but I didn't think I was telling the truth, because I felt like I had failed to acknowledge any sense of adversity. And so, you know what? I went back into the text and I changed it, and I added some stuff that was a little bit, a little scarier, but I felt like it was wrapped in the world of love. So then Lauren gets the text, and he's going to show you a little bit about his definitely a different technique he used for this book. But first, you get the words. They look like this.
Yeah. So here I am with words and paper, and it's a manuscript. So we've talked about things, but it's my job now to make this into a movie. So I love movies. I watched a lot of TV growing up in the 70s, and I love stories. And when I watch a movie, I like to pay attention to what the director has decided for each image. Some images in a movie are big and fast, and they have loud music behind them. Other images or other scenes are really soft and quiet. And that's how I like to pretend that I'm a film director. So I study Matt's words. You can see those are just colored pencils. Here's the original. Sometimes I'll just write ideas, streams of thought, little notions, little concepts that maybe I could make into a picture. I'm trying to more than anything, get to the heart and the emotional hit of Matt's words. And there was some deep stuff in this text, like we talk about.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, I'm looking at, in time you learn to recognize a love overlooked, a love that wakes at dawn and rides to work on the bus. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get inside of a house or an apartment. Maybe it's an urban scene. When you're the illustrator, you're the casting director of this particular book. You're the cinematographer. You're the prop master. You're designing the entire visual. So there's lots of decisions. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have this boy with his back turned, staring out a window, and he's going to have his hand on the window. And it's going to be kind of sort of an emotional scene, maybe. He's putting his hand up. That little thing is a piece of paper. Maybe he has a to-do list. His parent has left the house even before he goes to school. I've got his hand touching the window. The bus represents the parent leaving. I thought maybe this is kind of good. I thought it was a decent illustration. I have the oversized slippers that fit like love, which I thought was kind of cool. But it didn't hit the right moment in the story, in Matt's words. It even, I thought, took me in a different direction. I thought maybe this took me into some type of abandonment or, something, just a different feeling. So I did another sketch where I take the hand down, I show the parent. You see, I'm still not sure what kind of apartment or house this child lives in. We wanted to be as inclusive as we could in our book, Love. From the top to the bottom, we tried our best because we wanted to represent us, right, as people.
Maybe you could walk us through the underwear choice here, because you've switched a little bit, switched gears a little bit.
Well, Matt, I grappled with that decision for a long time. I want to be realistic. I'm thinking tighty-whities or boxers. You can see I'm struggling. You know, sometimes an artist struggles with these decisions. But what I decided is, my wife, by the way, didn't like the tighty-whities. And you'll see in the final book, there's no tighty-whities. But still, I thought, this is good. This is representing, this is illustrating your words. But I thought, what can I bring to it? You know, you've left me all this room to illustrate your book because your words are profound, but there's lots of space for me to create. So I wanted to tell another story of love. And you can see throughout the book, sometimes the love in Matt's words is even in the background, like the cab scene. So I thought, you know what? Maybe there's another element. I don't like the isolation in this picture as much. So I brought in a brother. And I also made it a different kind of window, a smaller window. I took the draperies out.
Yeah. And this is a big moment in the book because, you know, this is where the child for the first time is, because there's no main character. And what I wanted to do with the text at least, is I wanted to have the narrative arc be the evolution of love in a child's life. So, you know, when my daughter was young, love was given to her. She was lucky to have parents who loved her. When we would feed her, you know, it was just an act of love. But as you get older, you have to find love. It's a more agented love, right? Where you notice things and you start to see love in the world. And now this child, this is the first illustration where he's looking for love. But look what Lauren brought in. The first thing I thought when I saw this is I was like, where are my slippers? But then I said, you know what? This is pretty cool. This brother probably wants to hustle to school. But yet before he goes, he makes sure his little brother eats. So I actually changed the text. This has never happened to me in my career. I actually changed the text because of a sketch. So that's kind of a testament to what Lauren was thinking too. And then I thought, this brother probably doesn't make the best toast. I'm not sure I trust his toast making skills. So I came up with the line, a slice of burned toast that tastes like love, instead of the slipper line. And I liked that the toast wasn't perfect because it kind of fit with the book too. Lauren didn't know that I had changed the text though, because at this part we were kind of doing our own thing. So Lauren, why don't you, before you even talk about getting the change, why don't you take us through your technique?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so when I first saw Matt's, and you know, and that's another good point. We discussed through the book dummy. That's the plan, the sketches of the book. We had lots of communication, but then I kind of hibernated and disappeared in my studio to make the actual art. So that's why we were kind of not in touch at that moment. Matt's text about love is representing love in all kinds of forms. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Sometimes it's a little vulnerable. Sometimes it's a little raw. Sometimes it's a little messy. Sometimes it's a little overworked, and sometimes it's unworked. And I thought it was so honest. I've made my paintings the same way my entire career. I use water-based either acrylic paints or gouache on either canvas or illustration board. I work my art into oblivion. Sometimes I can't stop, and it's just my personality or whatever, but I just try and make them the best I can, and sometimes I just work them into crazy. I over-control my art. I had taken a class in printmaking at the Art Academy of Cincinnati, an evening class. And I'd long been interested in printmaking. Are there any printmakers out here? Any people that do monotype prints? This is perfect. None of you have done it. Okay, because I'm a beginner. Took this class, and I learned how to do monotypes. And what you do is, I loved it because there's no taking back. In a way, I'll walk you through the process, but once you put it through the press and pull the paper up, it's there. You either have something really nice or something that's not nice, that's not good. So instead of painting on the canvas or the illustration board, I used a technique called monotype, where you paint on a plexiglass plate. And you can see I've traced down my brother's scene there. Then you take some brayers and you ink up with oil-based ink. If you look at the art from Love, I don't think I would have reached those colors without trying this technique. Those rich colors are oil-based printmaking inks. So I've taken the brayer, inked up my brayer, put the blue on, just kind of messy, put the red on, and then took some flesh tone, put the flesh tone on with a paintbrush, and then the part that was unclean, that went out of the lines, I would take paper towels or Q-tips and wipe away what I didn't want. And I would take the plate down to my makeshift little printmaking studio that I set up in my basement. I even got a tabletop press that I talked my wife into thinking was a good idea. And put the glass plate on the bed of the press, and then take moist paper, lay it down on top, and run it through that press, and press that ink into the paper, mash it down, pull up the paper, and that's what you get. So if you look closely at all the art, it's nothing, the art is a compilation of a bunch of monotype prints that I made, and I would never have gotten those textures by hand. That was a lot of fun for me. Has anybody ever done collage art? Okay, you know where I'm going with this? Yes. I had never done it. It was the first time. But I realized I couldn't do it all on one plate, so I decided I'm going to collage this book. And again, I'm a little nervous because I'd never done this before, but I wanted to bring something different to the table for Love. I went and did a print of the background. You can see the one on the right felt too dark, but I liked the window, and I did something called a ghost print. So I ran through the press, and it went too dark, pulled it up, but there's still ink left on the plate. So I took another clean sheet of paper, and I put that on top of the plate, and ran it through the press, pulled it up, and I got the one on the left. And I loved those textures and that warmth, the warm texture. I never would achieve that with my paintbrush. But I liked the window on the right, so I cut it out, move it over, glue it into the background on the left. Then I go back and get my figures, cut them out with an X-Acto blade, take them over, glue them onto the other background. And then basically what you see there is my picture. At this point, I took out my paintbrushes like I've done my whole career and colored pencils and finished the picture. Definitely needed to pay close attention to the expressions. There was a lot of emotion in your text, and I wanted to make sure I rose to that moment. And even though there's just a little simple descriptive visual language in that face, it hit the right emotional note for me.
And this is my favorite. This is when he found out about the line that was changed because of his sketch. He felt proud of himself. And watch this. See this toast right here? It looks like it's well done. He had to make it burn. So here, ready? That's my favorite little moment.
Yeah. I used black colored pencil. Rocket science.
So here's what we wanted to do before we turn to you guys to see if anybody has questions. But there are a couple images that I think are especially important that I love to talk about. This is my favorite scene in the book. I'm taking the point of view of a child. This is a picture book, right? But I think we all have heard of the imposter syndrome that we sometimes have when we enter a new place, like when you first go to college, first get into a job, first get your book published, when you win the Newbery. You have the imposter syndrome, right? And so this child, to me, is 18 years old and he's going off to college. But there's a part of him that still feels like that toddler. And so I feel like that captures that. And it's a big moment for me in the book. This is a big moment. Feel free to add anything you want to this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things as the illustrator I was trying to do with this was I wanted everybody in this room to be able to look at this and have a different thought of what could be on that TV, you know, depending on our age, depending on our experiences in life. And that's why it was very important to me that I didn't draw something in the TV, that it's just a glow.
Yeah. And to me, it's like, guess what? The reason why it makes sense that he didn't name the tragedy is because the sad thing is it's going to be a new thing every week. You know, it depends on when you read it. But also, again, this is from the point of view of a child, and look what's happening here. This grandmother loves her granddaughter so much, right? That she's trying to keep her away from this information that could be harmful. But look what she's also done, inadvertently. She's separated that child from the family. And that's a huge moment. This leads to what I call the fall from grace in the poem, where the next image is the girl is dreaming and searching for a love that seems lost. So this is a big moment for me.
Yeah, and it's fun for me, Matt. I mean, we can make a lot of statements with our work for children, you know, and we can do it just by our words, and I can do it just by my pictures. It was exciting for me to hit emotional chords in a picture book for kids that I'd never gone to. You know, I'd never done a scene like this.
Yeah.
That had something, you know, that's could be disturbing.
Yeah.
The dream sequence. I've never done that kind of art for a picture book.
Yeah.
And of course the child.
Yeah, let's go to that one. So this is a big, there's a big risk we took on this. We talked a lot about it. The way we perceived of this is first of all, sadly, there are so many kids in the world right now that are under the piano, the metaphorical piano. And then Lauren and I talked about this. We thought, if you're lucky enough to be a young person who doesn't know this experience, is there any better place to explore emotional complexity like this than in the lap of a loved one while reading a book? So we felt like it was a nice opportunity for empathy from the young person's point of view, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is like, I call it the hidden diversity. We're getting a lot better with including different races, kind of like echoing the world racially. But this is a hidden diversity. This kid might not be in that many books. And this is when I knew we made the right decision, because I was reading it to my daughter, who's 3.5, who doesn't understand this, because I drink when she goes to bed. No, I'm just kidding. Who doesn't understand this, and guess what? I was reading this book to her for the very first time, and we got to this page, I read her the text, and then I went to turn the page, and she slapped the page back down and wanted to look at it longer. And that's when I thought, that's what we're trying to do. We're just giving a child an opportunity to explore something.
We've heard from a lot of people, teachers, and teachers specifically,
Yeah.
about discussions they've had in classrooms on a lot of different levels, not just the elementary grades, but
Yep.
junior high school and high school. And it's amazing how, for example, teachers are actually having opening up discussion with a child who is concerned about this kind of domestic disagreement.
Yep. Discord, yeah.
Yeah. We've heard from teachers also that, we have a trailer in a trailer park or a trailer in our book.
Absolutely. And then I wanted to land on this because, to me, this is the biggest moment in the book. There's, after the fall from grace, the child has to seek love in other places, right? Find it. See the parent that's going to work and providing. But at some point, that child has to look in the mirror and find love within, right? I think you have to do that before you can go out into the world. But there's another layer, and this to me is really important. This child is looking in the mirror, yes. But this child is also looking at us and daring us to not acknowledge her existence. So I think that's important too. And I would love to, Lauren, if it's okay with you, if I just kind of show you how this picture evolved, because Lauren shared this with me, and I love kind of just putting it out there. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So he just got this text, just a couple words. So maybe we thought we would turn to you guys now and see if you guys have any questions or thoughts, anything you would like to share or ask us about. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Yeah.
My question is, you touched on this already about compromising and collaborating.
Yeah.
Do you have to make compromises, or was that hard to do?
That's a great question. I think you do make compromises with the understanding that your vision isn't necessarily the right vision. You know what I mean? It's just your vision. By the way, in a weird way, it echoes politics. You know, we can all have our ideology, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're right. And that's why Laura and I were talking about this today, actually in the car in Georgia, because we were in Georgia this morning. Just that it would be so great if people with different ideologies could sit down and just have a conversation. So my vision, it wasn't necessarily correct. And sometimes you can't see the back of your own head. So sometimes somebody comes in who's talented like Lauren, and he shows you something you never would have thought of, such as that boy with his younger brother giving him toast. You know, like something that never crossed my mind. And I was so moved by it that I bent to what he was doing. You know what I mean? So I think you have to show humility as a creator.
Yeah, and I'm not only working with Matt, I'm working with an art director and an editor. So I'm giving them my sketches, and they're weighing in as well. It was a great creative experience. I like to point out the one image of you see the grandfather's crease, or your grandfather's crease, or creases in his face as he turns his bucket over to fish with you. And Matt was thinking of a gritty, more urban scene on a pier out in the ocean.
Yep.
And my mind went straight to the Ozark Mountains, where my parents lived for a while, in a little idyllic little dock, community dock. And what we decided was and I don't even know, this was sort of more with me and the art director, is let's do something that is somewhere in the middle, you know. Let's make it just like a little overpass. And the grandfather probably parked his truck or his car, and they walked down and fished with the grandchild.
Somebody else? Anybody else? Other questions? Or yeah.
This question is more for Lauren. You showed numerous pictures of you arriving at this illustration as the final picture in the book. How long did it take you to do that? From the time you got the words, that looks like it was quite an elaborate process. How long is that process?
That's a good question. And this is one of the more simple images because it was just one plate. Yeah, some of them were a bunch of different plates. But yeah, I probably did that sketch pretty quickly, you know, so maybe a day or two. In fact, my little sketches are quite small. That's the head, the face, just a little pencil sketch called a thumbnail. But then this one, getting it approved 2-3 days kind of thing. Of course, it's lumped in with all the other sketches, and we're just going through, all right, we like this one, let's green light that one, do this and fidget with that. The brothers scene probably went through about 6 different drawings that I didn't show, but this painting, I messed one of them up, by the way, so I had to scrap it. But this one, I probably have 4 days, 4 good hearty working days. But some of them, like the trailer park scene, I probably spent 7, 8, 9 days on it because it was so intricate and so complex. And that was the one that I had to do to prove to myself that I could do this printmaking technique. Because I thought, if I can't do the hardest one in the book with this new art technique, then I can't do any of them. So I'll scrap it and go back to my painting into oblivion all night long into the wee hours.
Alone.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Good question. Thank you, sir.
Matt, who comes up with the timeline or your time frame?
So like the publishing time frame? Well, so usually it works like this. So when I write a novel, it takes me a year and a half to go through all the revisions and stuff. And then you would think the book comes out pretty soon, right? Usually it takes 2 more years. With a picture book, it's kind of the same thing, but this was different. I think we finished the book, was it like about a year ago?
Yeah. I actually didn't turn this artwork in until like February or March of 2017.
Yeah.
And the book published January 8th.
So that's like a miracle. Like it was
Yeah.
published in less than 2 years after he was done with the art.
They fast-tracked it, yeah.
Yeah,
Less than a year.
yeah.
Yeah. Usually they want me to turn in art a year and a half ahead of the publication date.
And then they got on the phone with us and said, we would like you to be on the road for 6 weeks. And both of us were like,
Yeah.
so,
Right.
but we said, you know what, we want to give the book a chance to find a home, so
Right.
we committed to it. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Well, congratulations on the sales and being on the Times bestseller list.
Thank you. That was
How's
kind
the
of fun.
reaction been as you've been around on your tour?
I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is we did All Things Considered, and there have been a lot of people at our events that heard that, and it's really cool because I'm an NPR head, so it was really awesome that it's almost like you're meeting people from your community, even though they're in different states. So yeah, it's been amazing.
It's been very gratifying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, somebody knows about sales.
Yeah.
We thought it was like a secret little talk that we have after events, but
Yeah. It's been great. Any other questions?
Since you brought up radio, NPR, and being in Brooklyn, Steve Scott and Wayne Cabot on WCBS radio, when you're painting, do you have a radio on sometimes? Just in the room? And have these people ever given you know who they are?
yeah.
Have they ever influenced you in any way?
No. Well, first of all, I never listen to music or radio while I'm writing because I don't want the music to impose itself in my rhythms of language. Because when I write a picture book, I got to get the story right and then I got to get the music right. So, and if you hear me read this, to me it's like a spoken word poem as much as anything. But I know who they are, of course. Do you listen to the radio when you're
I listen
illustrating?
I listen to music when I'm painting, when I'm making, when I'm concepting, I listen to music, and sometimes I'll listen to talk radio, and but then I can't think, because they're distracting me. So I listen to music when I'm really trying to come up with ideas. So it's kind of like writing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to listen to somebody talk about, who knows what, if you're writing because you're trying to think. Same with me trying to concept.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So you talked about visiting the elementary schools, and
Yeah.
writing for children. Do you alter your writing in any way for that audience, or do you just write?
Okay, so you were talking about when I make a book. Yeah, so you know what's interesting is I do, but not that much. Because in a weird way, sometimes I think love, the book, is almost as interesting to a 8th grader as it is to a 4th grader. They're just bringing different things to the book. Like the one thing I think I've learned as a writer is to leave space for the reader. Because I always say sometimes the reader is smarter than the writer. So if you leave space for the reader, then amazing things can happen. But when I write a picture book, I know it's going to be obviously, it's all about the economy of language. There's an innocence there. And the main thing is I'm taking the point of view of youth. You know what I mean? So sometimes I think about this book for me in terms of the text. It's almost like childhood. The idea of childhood is narrating the story and coaching a kid through. Yes?
This is actually a little bit more of a comment, but when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, as a parent, a daughter who will be going to college in 2 years. So like, this picture is, when I think you read that for me. I mean, that's what I say, like, she's going to be going off with my whole group of people who love her from standing there. So I could always turn that around and say, this is the parents who are giving.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I think ideally there's space for multiple readers. I think some books, they're definitely for a certain age. And those books, my daughter loves them. But I think there's space for all kinds of different books in a child's home, And I think this is one where if you're a parent, you see it in one way. Here's the interesting thing. I have a 3.5-year-old. He has 2 college boys, and they both will see the book in a different way. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I read your Times article about children practice.
Yeah.
There's a part in the article you say that you got pushback from a gatekeeper, but then you fought for it. Could you talk more about how you spoke to the gatekeeper to convince them not seeing the child?
Please give some context so everybody could hear what the question was.
So,
good question.
The question was, I wrote an article in Time, time.com, I guess, which is actually going to be in Time the magazine on Friday, I just found out. But let's see if I can get to this real quick. So basically, my idea was, hey, we have this piece here. Lauren and I talked a lot about this. It's right here. It's this illustration. We received pushback that a major gatekeeper, I won't say who, initials are involved, but I won't say who.
It's an account. It's not a publisher. It's a
I don't know what you would call them, but they're big time. But anyways, they said, hey, if you don't change that image, we can't support the book. We talked about it, and we decided we have to fight for it and just write and make the book that we wanted to make. And we're lucky because we've had successes in other, with other books. So it afforded us to take that risk. And I will say, by the way, that account, they came around and are now supporting the book. But my question was, and if you haven't read the essay, it's basically, I asked the question, what is the job of the writer for the very young? To tell the truth or preserve innocence? And as a YA writer, this is something I don't know the answer to because I'm still new. This is only my 4th picture book,
Yeah.
But we talked about it, and what were your feelings?
When I read these words, it never, you didn't get that scene from these words. But I thought I could do something a lot more safe, and I could do one of my ideas was two children at the end of summer, and it's a Norman Rockwell scene of a moving van, and one friend is moving away. Summers fade, and so do people. I thought about the death of a grandmother. I thought about the death of a family pet, and all these things are heavy and real. And then I thought about, the divorce rate in this country, which is like half. And if that's half, then how many children are living in that, It's not always tragic, There's a lot of hope and love in this scene. but it exists. And there's some addiction in my family, and certainly extended family and divorce. And so what we're saying to them is, you exist, you know?
Yeah.
You live in our book. And
not only that, can I just add one more thing? This is a key too. So we have an image with the boy under the piano, but I feel like you are a lucky person if you also have this mother or this caretaker who will bend to your ear and whisper, it's okay, it's love. So they're in the same book, you know?
right.
But did you want to add something?
Or I just wanted to say, I grew up with Barney Sindak,
Oh, yeah.
and I always felt like he was the first adult who ever told me truth.
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that, yeah. I mean, still, yeah, thank you. You know what's funny? Still to this day, when I read my daughter, what is this famous book, Where the Wild Things Are? I just am like, oh my
Good.
God, this is a guy who dug so deep into the psychology of a child who's been sent to bed without dinner, right? And then goes to Where the Wild Things Are and tries to send the wild things to bed without their dinner. It's like, it was so deep inside the child's psychology. You know what I mean? It's just amazing.
I just have to say, I identify with the kid under the piano, and I gotta tell you, it's so healing to see that image included in this book.
Well, that alone, that's why we're proud of this being in the book.
Yeah, and we heard from a teacher just yesterday how there was a child in his class, and he was troubled, and he finally, because that image was in the book, he finally could actually talk about it with his teacher and just say, hey, my parents are,
So
this
the
is
teacher
happening.
used it as a tool, and isn't that what literature is really? Is a tool?
And your favorite
That's all it
writer, getting back to your point,
Yeah.
your favorite writer, Kate DiCamillo, responded.
To my essay. And by the way, and you know what one of the most amazing parts of her essay response was? She said, maybe the job of the writer for the very young is to love the world. So guess what? Every time we sign this book now, we put love the world as an homage to her. So it's just weird how that stuff works. You know, it's like, it's a conversation that we don't have the answers to, but we just want to put it into the world. Maybe one more.
I'm a school librarian, and I've read this to several kindergarten classes today. And this, we were discussing on each illustration and the words to echo back where they saw or heard love in the story. So they, in the illustrations or in your words. And in this one, you know, I just let it sit there for a second and I said, maybe there's not on this page much love being felt, you know, at the crying mom. And a girl, a kindergartner, raised her hand right away and said, the dog's showing love right there. So, you know, they see so much and bring to.
I think you were very careful to make sure there was love in this image, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and definitely the dog was a way to do that. And, you know, I believe that this person here on the right, there's still love coming from him and the mother. And it's so cool to hear that from you. Yeah, thank you. And it's, you know, when you're doing that with your kids, your students, it's kind of a cool, fun assignment, because you could say to them, if you were illustrating this book, you might have made different choices. You might have come up with a different idea. You know, any given manuscript handed to a different illustrator could become is a completely different book. And that's the fun collaboration of what we know as the picture book, the dance between the pictures and the image, the words and the images. And it's just like a film being put into another director's hands. It can become a different beast.
And you know, one of my favorite things that Lauren did here is, in this book, is he allowed the text to be heavy. And I think this book needed that. If he undercut the words, like, on purpose, I got very spare here, you know. It's very, very fragmented sentences, and I end on, and people, and it's heavy, and he allowed it to remain heavy. Now, there are other parts of the book where I get wordy, right? So this is a different tone, and it's I love this. We've never even talked about this, but I feel like this scene visually is very hectic and frantic and scattered, and everything's happening, and it kind of echoes the words. It's kind of cool how that works.
This, Matt, did you notice the one guy's handing an umbrella out to the...
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, we're in negotiations for this painting. So, yeah, I want to hang it on my wall. Yes.
In the songwriter world, there would be a lot of people that would want to work with you.
There are songwriters here in Nashville?
There's a lot that would want to work with you. Do you guys plan to collaborate again? Do you have people that desperately want to illustrate with you now that they've seen you illustrate with someone else? I mean, how is this working?
Well, so, he writes too. So he's got some books he's writing. We definitely have something in the works for another collaboration. We've really enjoyed working together. But yeah, my favorite thing is Lauren has a stack of manuscripts he's supposed to illustrate, and he bumped them for me. And I was very proud of that because I really wanted Lauren to do the picture book. So it really just depends on the project. If he's moved, he might bump it and make it a priority. If there's an illustrator that wants to work with me and it fits a manuscript, I would love to, I'll go for it. So it just depends on the project.
Tomorrow is World Read Aloud Day. I saw that on Twitter. You're going to read. And I'm definitely reading this to my children.
That's awesome.
All
We're going to
right.
do it. We're going to do it after this thing. We're going to huddle with whoever's left here at the end, and we're going to do a little private reading on video for tomorrow.
In fact, if anybody wants to be a part of it,
Yeah.
we don't pay.
It's a bit of a marathon, though. The signing line sometimes takes a while, but yeah, we are going to do that at the end. So whoever's left, the stragglers, we're going to gather you together. And we thought it would be cool if it was adults instead of kids, because we want to put out the message that, hey, picture books are for kids
Kids are welcome too.
and adults. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool. One last question, and then we'll let you guys go home or go to your music venue that you're going to go to. Well, hey guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming out and listening to us talk about love.
Thank you, guys.